Hey guys, it's me Josh, back again with another Retro Redux. Now, I know what you're thinking, it's been a long time since the last Retro Redux, right? Well, I've been living life, going through things, experiencing what we all know as this beautiful thing called existence. Hello?
Pain. That's it.
What are we gonna do?
There's only one thing a man can do when he's suffering from a spiritual and existential funk.
Go to the zoo, flip off the monkeys?
No.
Watch Peacemaker on HBO Max.
It's so beautiful.
And I decided I'm gonna take a stance here and take a couple of these next videos to talk about things that I really love. Today we're talking about a movie that I actually really love and honestly is one of my favorite superhero movies of this decade and probably will end up being in my top 5 by the time we get to 2030, considering the next wave of superhero movies that we're getting. Today we're talking about James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Yeah, the good one.
God, Miss Waller, we've got a freaking kaiju up in this shit!
Alright, first things first. This movie has the sauce, something that Suicide Squad lacked, something that the DCEU up until this point lacked tremendously, was the sauce visually. There are things throughout this entire movie that gives it character just by looking at it. If you watch it on mute, you'll see things like the title cards. The camera work in this movie is dynamic. There's motion in the camera and a bunch of moments in this film that make it feel super kinetic. Or if you're not watching it on mute and you're watching it with your eyes closed, it's a James Gunn movie. The music is gonna hit, the jokes are gonna hit. You add all of that cool stuff that this film has into this sauce gumbo, and the main ingredient, the main meat of this sauce gumbo, as I call it, is the costume design. This film has a bunch of cool costumes and props that make it feel like a legitimate superhero movie, or just slight visual references to the comics. I'm talking about things like Ratcatcher's signature walk, or even Bloodsport's nano weapons and helmet. Peacemaker's entire getup in this film, how colorful it is and how stupid he looks, is honestly perfect. That plus Polka Dot Man's rashes, and even how funny and goofy they look in their undercover outfits, and then combine it with their weird quasi undercover slash superpowered outfits, I thought also looked pretty cool. And obviously including Starro in this movie. Not only does that mean that like the DCEU and Warner Brothers in general had like no plans for any of these characters, let alone fucking Starro, the first Justice League villain, but they allowed James Gunn to have so much fun with this. It is clear as to why James Gunn is the director and lead of the DCEU, or the DCU, I guess you could say. Man, whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about now. The better one. The one with the cooler Superman, the cooler Green Lantern, the fucking Mr. Terrific. That universe is what we're talking about. But before we get into the Universal conversation, let's talk about the plot. No, not that plot, or that one. We're talking about the actual plot of the movie. The Suicide Squad team is assembled once again to infiltrate an island in which secret US intelligence information is located and must be retrieved. See how easy that is? Like, it's literally just a one-sentence summary of the plot. Of course, there's way more things involved, including the dynamic of the team and the individuals involved, Amanda Waller's secret motivations behind the mission, as well as the villains and other villain and the other villain. It's super easy. And You see how easy it is to select a bunch of members of a team, a Suicide Squad team, where their powers, abilities, and skills are actually justified, as opposed to the guy who could just climb anything. It's a simple special ops mission with a bunch of people who have the skills designated for stealth and special operations, not just having a crazy girl with a bat against a bunch of demonic entities that are invulnerable to bullets, you know? So I mentioned earlier that this is the quasi new universe. This is a soft reboot of Suicide Squad 2016, meaning that it has characters and plot lines that continue from the original film, but overall it's meant truly as a vessel to reintroduce some of the more preferred characters back into the DCU and eliminate the ones that really weren't that good or handled well.
You don't want no beef? You don't want no beef?
Honestly, this is the first DC movie since Batman and Robin that truly embraces the campiness of a comic book universe without making it a complete joke. Obviously, there are jokes in this movie. It's a fucking James Gunn movie.
Starfish is a slang term for a butthole. Think there's any connection?
No.
But the jokes in which aren't just, hey, this guy looks ridiculous and that's it. It's, hey, this guy looks ridiculous, but this entire situation is ridiculous, so let's just fucking go with it. I think the quick inclusion of the Suicide Squad B team at the beginning is a perfect example of that. All these guys, even in the comics, are just a bunch of bums anyway, so why not have them be treated like bums? I know a lot of people were mad about Captain Boomerang getting executed at the beginning, but I mean, it really does a good job of showing you how seriously James Gunn is taking this film and the title, as well as the overall essence of the Suicide Squad from the comics, versus the first movie in which only one member of the team died by the end of the movie, and then finally we get another sacrifice with Diablo. This is just straight up balls to the wall, violent, gory, people are going to die, people are going to get executed, get with it. Comic book movies in the early 2000s, to be honest, would have just had the B team be a bunch of OCs because the studio didn't really care about including legitimate comic book characters like Savant. Also, the inclusion of various background characters near the beginning, like Calendar Man and whatever this girl is who looks like a fucking church window, is super appreciated. Is the reason why 2016 really doesn't work, because the universe up until that point, despite it only being 3 movies at the time, was really try-hardy and attempting to be grounded in a weird Christopher Nolan / Zack Snyder inspired way. Gunn's interpretation of the DCU now, and even in this movie, is very lived in and varied. Weasel and other characters all exist, and they may be included as like an odd punchline to a joke or a visual gag, but until you watch something like Creature Commandos, it makes that character, who is nothing but a punchline and a gag, an actual tragic character with an interesting backstory. Gunn getting an R rating in this movie also is super important, especially for the film's final act, to show you how disgusting and violent the universe can be. It doesn't mean that the rest of the universe will be this. Similarly to my major issue with the DCEU, which was Man of Steel is pretty much how the rest of the universe felt until they decided to not take things seriously, thusly creating such a weird, jarring feeling from the beginning of this universe to the end. Something that even the MCU, which has a bunch of tonally varying things, still doesn't entirely feel as disconnected as Man of Steel does to something like Aquaman 2 or The Flash. But also, Gunn getting an R rating for this movie supplements the title. It should be brutal and horrific, and people should die considering the circumstances. The initial gore and violence is used as comedic punchlines and shock purposes in the first 2 acts, but once we get to the 3rd act, it goes balls to the wall with body horror and terrifying imagery. In fact, Peter Capaldi's acting as the Thinker in the reveal scene is the cherry on top. And speaking of Peter Capaldi as the Thinker, let's just get into the characters in general, starting with the actual Suicide Squad team. We got Bloodsport, Ratcatcher 2, Peacemaker, Killer Shock, and Polka Dot Man. And all of these characters with a much smaller team does a much better job focusing on their character development and their character motivations and how they all connect with one another. Bloodsport is obviously a swap out for Deadshot, Ratcatcher for Diablo, Harley for Harley, Flag for Flag, I guess, Killer Shock for Killer Croc, and Peacemaker for Boomerang. All of these characters are so much better in this movie because they all have their own motivations, backstories, and things that you can be sympathetic towards. Like Polka Dot Man's entire backstory is like a even more fucked up version of Cyborg's backstory, in which his parent worked for Star Labs and just experimented on him until he became a fucking monster. Killer Shark is an outsider who is really trying hard to just be accepted, not just in the team, but as a part of society. Even though I do think Killer Shark in the Harley Quinn show is better.
Fresh fish! Now, fellas, look, I know it's just in fun, but what the fuck did I tell you about that word?
Oh, yeah, sorry, King.
Oh, they're learning. Baby steps. Right, Harley? I will kill each and every one of you!
Since there's so much better writing from the previous film, it makes all of these characters, regardless of how ridiculous they look or their powers are, feel like real people with real connections with one another. Bloodsport, being such a flawed, self-hating dad, is revealed to be much more than he hates his kid and doesn't want to be a father. He actually really cares about his kid and just wants her to stay away from him because he doesn't want her to be used as leverage against him with Waller, which is something that for some reason is something they kind of just ignored about Will Smith's character in 2016, whereas it's honestly the driving factor for Bloodsport and Ratcatcher's relationship and his overall ascendance into being a leader. Like, seriously, Bloodsport wanting to keep his daughter away not from just a criminal life but from Waller's grasp is a better hook than anything done in the original Suicide Squad movie, and also doesn't assassinate Batman's character in the process.
Daddy, please.
Zoe, move!
Please, Daddy, don't do it.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
Somehow, Idris Elba is also way funnier than anything Will Smith did in the 2016 movie.
I'm an assassin! Why would I share my liabilities?
Oh, he's offering you a pretty leaf to show you it means no harm.
Why the fuck would I want to leave?
Which is weird because Will Smith is supposed to be the funny guy in his movies at times. He's super charismatic and funny, so it's just kind of weird that nothing in that movie worked, whereas pretty much every time there's an attempt at humor with Idris Elba's portrayal, it's actually fucking hilarious.
No one likes to show off.
Unless what they're showing off is dope as fuck.
Fuck. That's true.
Ratcatcher attempting to reach every member of the Suicide Squad's team's heart and choosing compassion and succeeding with everyone until she reaches the end with Peacemaker, I thought was a fantastic spin on things. And then we get to Peacemaker's inner conflict, especially his moments with Rick Flag, I thought were actually super well acted by John Cena, and it also makes complete sense that they decided to give that character a spin-off considering the nuance. Like, if you watch the Peacemaker show, pay attention to John Cena's reactions during Bloodsport and Ratcatcher's conversation on their way to the party. And like I mentioned earlier, Rick Flag and Harley Quinn are pretty much the only returning major characters outside of Amanda Waller, who Amanda Waller, portrayed by Viola Davis, is somehow way more nuanced and interesting in this movie, despite the fact that I thought she was great in Suicide Squad. I guess that's just Gunn's little additive writing. You know, I know I sound like a gun glazer, but listen, I ain't putting a silencer on this gun, believe that, all right? Rick Flag is given much more to do, and honestly, Joel Kinnaman's charisma translates way more in this movie than anything he does in the first movie.
This is Katana. She's got my katana. She can cut all you in half with one katana.
And Harley Quinn is still cringe, but in a good way, because that's pretty much her character. And Margot Robbie is Harley Quinn. At this point, I'm kind of surprised she hasn't returned to the DCU. I know James Gunn is probably still finalizing how he wants to portray Batman, and as well as his rogues gallery, but I mean, come on, you could give her the legit costume, you could give her the fucking Arkham City costume, you could give her any costume, and I feel like her portrayal of the character would be fine, at the very least, and she fine. Like, for real, watch this movie, bro. If you got a crush on Margot Robbie, watch this movie, bro. Also, the inclusion of side characters like John Economos and Amelia Harcourt before we see them in Peacemaker is done pretty well, not gonna lie. And finally, let's get to the villains. Now, probably the weakest part of this movie is the Maltesians,
Whatever you Mario Kart racing D-bags are called!
The people who rebelled against the leaders of this country and are trying to take it over are just, you know, generic, I guess. There is, I guess, some funny stuff that's done with the original leader and Harley, but nothing that really stood out to me. And then we get to the Thinker, and I think Peter Capaldi does a great job with this character. The character of the Thinker is there to represent an aspect of misogyny as well as, you know, sexual predation, as the Thinker character was pretty much essentially violating Starro completely, and there's definitely some allusions to that being an underlying theme in the film, especially with Harley's little side quest that she goes on and how that all ends up. But I do really appreciate that creepy factor to the Thinker. And to be honest, I don't really know what more could have been done with this character, so I'm okay with the fact that he just gets turned into fucking slushy.
Night part 2. Hey, McCart, watch this.
What are you doing? Why would you kill him like that?
You're next.
Like I said earlier, I think his little conversation with Rick Flag at the end about what the American government and Amanda Waller are actually up to is pretty cool and well done. I also think his costume looks pretty funny in real life too. And finally we get to it, Starro, the main event. Now, when this movie was first announced, there were a bunch of trailers. They did like this whole weird DC reveal of a bunch of things like video games and movies and TV shows that were all coming out soon. And when they announced this movie, I wasn't too sure about it. Now, as much as I love Idris Elba and the rest of the cast, I wasn't excited about another Suicide Squad movie until it was announced that James Gunn was writing and directing it. But it honestly wasn't until the second, or I guess maybe first official trailer was released, in which they showed that Starro the Conqueror would be making an appearance. Now, I'm not this super fan of Starro the Conqueror from the comics. I just remember him from the Justice League cartoon as a kid, and obviously the iconic Starro the Conqueror cover from back in the day that, I mean, I'm pretty sure you've seen. To be honest with you, in this movie, I love that they gave the character a tragic backstory and also portrayed it as a kaiju that needed to be handled. That was also incredibly dangerous considering how it can control people. It does the perfect job of subverting your expectations where, like I said, these group of people really aren't that powerful, really aren't that superpowered enough to be able to handle something like Starro, but because they're in the thick of it and this is revealed to be the extra layer of what they're trying to handle, it makes the movie's final act even better. And seriously, just look at the design of this character. It is so good to watch a comic book movie where the director and the cinematographer and everyone else involved with the visuals aren't afraid to include color, vibrancy, and just overall whimsy in some of the designs, as well as combining with how terrifying Starro the Conqueror is just as an entity. Overall, I gotta say, I love this movie and I'm glad it existed to pretty much destroy and demolish anything that was left of the DCEU. Like I said, it has this perfect balance of whimsy and comic book campiness combined with this brutal, violent, but still very funny world that Gunn is trying to establish. And I think when you compare it to something like Superman, which has much more whimsy and is less violent, it still balances out in a way that feels like this could happen in that world, the same way Peacemaker is currently happening in that world. Now, what did you guys think of the Suicide Squad? Did you think it was better than 2016 Suicide Squad? Did you think it is the best DCEU movie? And should they just fully embrace it as a part of the DCU? I mean, they kind of did. A bunch of the, you know, flashback sequences from this movie appear in Peacemaker. Maybe Bloodsport or a couple of other supporting characters should show up in this, you know, current or maybe next season of Peacemaker. I would really love that. But I want to thank y'all all for watching. Check out my letterbox to see what else I've watched this year and what are my favorite movies, and I will see y'all next time. Bye bye.